Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we've been talking a lot about what's happened in the United States with the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates, which is in a quick track towards negative interest rates one way or another in a recessionary situation. We see Canada in an even worse situation overall, nationally anyway. Obviously, the U.S. World Reserve currency will cause a massive domino effect, but Canada is definitely going to follow suit, and there's already been talk about Canada lowering interest rates. And with that said, when a country is already in a technical recession, you're in big trouble when you end up having to lower interest rates from there when they're incredibly low to begin with. But I want to first talk about how, we see all these articles coming up because it's 2019. It is a current year, as Justin Trudeau would say. And as this Toronto Sun article says, Goldstein, it's 2019. Where's Trudeau's balanced budget? Well, that's a good question because as this other article from capforcanada.com says, Justin Trudeau promised $1 billion surplus for 2019 and has delivered a deficit of $19.8 billion. So, I mean, I don't think any of us are incredibly surprised. Of course, Justin Trudeau initially said that the budget would balance itself and that it would all be okay and, sunny ways, right? Remember sunny ways? That was weird. But anyway, moving on, I think that one thing that is standing out most right now, and it's historic really, is what is happening with the yield curve inversion. It's not good in a lot of countries right now, but in Canada, we see the 1 month and 10 year inverted. And now a lot of you might be saying, well, what does that mean? How does that affect me? What does any of this mean really in general? Well, John, can you go into it for our audience, what this means, this yield curve inversion, and how close Canada truly is at the moment as all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero, how close we are to a true 100% recession that is going to affect every consumer.
Well, Canada's been in a recession for a very long time. I started writing my book back in 2015, Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? And that was during the Harper government where I was calling out the mass amounts of debt at that time. And of course, Canada is heavily debt saturated. I heard just in a recent, I think it was CJOB, was talking about how people in Canada in general are afraid of talking about money and all the problems that they're in, but they're in some really deep debt problems. They can't afford anything, a lot of them. And we're not hearing anything of that in the mainstream, really. It's very rarely, but with the yield curve inversion, and it's the 1 month and 30 year has
30 year.
Yeah, 30 year. But the 1 and 10 is also inverted.
Yeah.
But what of course, the economists would say, like, if you go and look at the United States, it's like, well, the 2 and 10 year hasn't inverted because that's the one that they look for. Well, it has in Canada. The Canadian yield curve has inverted, and the 2 and 10 year has also inverted in Canada. So we're in some deep problems there, and of course...
Yeah, but John, for those that aren't yet aware, we have a lot of new viewers here at WAM as of recently. Can you explain what the yield curve is?
Yeah, so the yield curve is basically... you look at all the government debt bonds from 1 month all the way up to 30 years, and there's a whole wide array. There's 1 month, there's 1 year, 3 year, 3 months, 7 years, 20 years, and so on. What you're looking at when you call a yield curve inversion, it's basically looking at a chart, and you see the lower terms are higher than the longer terms. So what you're seeing is, for example, if you go in and borrow money at the bank, the longer term on your debt that you're lending, that the bank is lending to you, the higher the interest will be because it's more risk. Well, not with the government bonds currently. It's actually more risky to lend at the short term, which makes sense because they're going to probably collapse, than the long term. But that doesn't make sense whatsoever, that we're going to trust the government over the long term more than we do in the short term. It's really confusing, but that's how it works. So you actually you are paying less of an interest on the long term than you do on the short term, which is total opposite of what, if you enter the bank and how that work. So what you're seeing with Canada is they're really struggling. And of course, stupid guys like Bill Monroe sold off all the gold reserves, and we confronted
Which we confronted him on.
Yeah, exactly. And now you're seeing, of course, gold is hitting record highs in Canadian dollars, and currently it's at 1,905.18 Canadian dollars. So you're seeing a record high in the gold price. Meanwhile, you have everything is fine. But you're also seeing record highs everywhere else in the world. So there's clearly...
Well, John, I mean, this is what historically happens when there's a problem with a fiat currency, and all fiat currencies have fallen eventually. People flood to things like gold and silver and now crypto, and we're both sweating because we're both in very hot places. Surprisingly, John's in Canada, I'm in Las Vegas, but we're equally dying from the heat right now. But with that said, John, I mean, can you tell our audience, how does that all happen? How did this all come to be in the most simplistic way possible that you could explain it?
Well, how it's come to be is, of course, the government has spent too much money. And that's why you're seeing the massive deficit. You know, you had Trudeau is just giving out money left, right, and center to try to get in more voters for the next term, which it doesn't look very well for him. You know, you got Trudeau must go hashtag. People are just disgusted with it. Like almost everybody that I talk to is like, who is this buffoon? You know, and this idiot, basically, people are calling him.
He's a running joke in the United States.
Yeah, no, he is something else. Like he is, of course, you know, his dad was good friends with Fidel Castro, and of course, you know, we can see that in his policies here in Canada as well. With, you know, a lot of the hate crime laws we saw. Of course, Dan Dix was banned, not banned, but suspended from Twitter. And
demonetized on YouTube. As they crack down on media, they bail out a bunch of medias and censor all the others.
Million. It's ridiculous, Josh. It's you're just giving 600 million out, and then of course there's, you know, the approved list of media that he's supposed to come out with, and on top of that there was actually I forgot what it's called, the alliance, but there's an alliance that actually will be running the questions and everything for the politicians now during the debates, and it's a consortium of all the big mainstream medias. So,
I warned about this years ago when I confronted him, and they gave me 5 questions to ask him, and I'm like, how about my own question? They're like, no, this is what he's ready for, and that led to me confronting him and calling him a scumbag. But I mean, this is what our friends at Freedom Free for All call shiny pony Justin Trudeau. The guy's a moron. He just wears colorful socks. I doubt he has any actual say in any of the policies. He's just a figurehead, and a really bad one. They picked a really bad figurehead because he's a complete moron, and nobody takes him seriously.
Yeah, we thought Bush was bad, you know, in the days of the United States. I think it was actually James Rickards. I was listening to James Rickards, and apparently he interviewed George Bush, and he was told that, it's different this time. This guy is really stupid.
Well, but anyway, I mean, all economies that completely centralize, force legal tender laws, enforce usury by the social contract, which you never sign, enforcing the debt on you, then you have to pay off the interest on the debt, the price of living skyrockets. All of these fail, every single one throughout history, and as we've gone into many times before, it goes back to 1024 AD in China, the first true fiat currencies. Every single one fails, and this one won't be different. So for those that say fear-mongering, for those that say you've been saying this forever, we've been right forever, and we're not fear-mongering. We're just pointing to basic economics, folks. This is what happens, and we need to be prepared, and there's many ways to be prepared. But first, I want to ask you, John, how is this yield curve inversion like this? It's a complete inversion, which we don't know of in any other place that I know of in recent times anyway, not in the last several years. What does this mean for countries like the United States and these other countries that Canada obviously deals with on a regular basis?
Well, it doesn't really mean anything to them. They don't really care about Canada. Canada's economy is a very small economy compared to other economies. But what you will see in Canada, and this is like, I want to get into something here that means a lot more, which is locally. And what you've seen, for example, I did a recent presentation here in Canada on the cashless society, but I did it with Canadian content. What I found, because I had to do the same research upon currency and circulation and all this, what I found was that they actually printed about 40% more base currency notes and coins, mostly notes, that they printed into circulation. And then on top of that, they on the M3, which is all the money combined that exists in Canadian dollars, they actually increased that by 10%, Josh, every year on an average. And when you actually go and look at the CPI, I was like, oh, how the heck are they, getting these numbers of 1.8%? Well, it was pretty funny because the actual number that they weighted with was 25.6% or 25.8. I forgot the exact number that you had of how much it costs you for the cost of living. Well, in Manitoba, it's 32%, so they're off there already. But the two major cities, Vancouver and Toronto, which almost like 50% of the population lives, they had a 75.5% of all of their money goes into paying for housing and related costs. Now that is a little bit off of the 25.8% that the actual CPI tells us that they calculate inflation from. So you can totally see where it's totally manipulated the CPI so we don't see the actual picture and how bad the inflation is, because inflation in Canada has been rampant, and I'm starting to see it everywhere in the stores. You're starting to see higher and higher prices all the time now. Like it doesn't take long, a couple of months, and suddenly you have a price hike in some kind of groceries or whatever it is. So it's not doing very well, the Canadian dollar, and of course with the mass printing of currency from the government in deficit spending, 19 point something billion, it's not making things better, of course. And the Canadian banks are in some serious trouble with the cash to deposit ratios. So the whole,
well, they're all bankrupt.
Yeah.
We've gone into that so many times. I mean, as you've gone into, John, you've looked into all these different balance sheets among all these major banks, and especially the credit unions are terrible. But the big banks are really terrible too. I mean, it's only on a scale of terrible and worse than terrible, where you see a lot of these under 1% cash to deposit ratio. But as we've talked about so many times before, you see these academics like Paul Krugman desperately clinging on to relevance as he tells people to break windows to simulate the economy. And it appears that Paul Krugman has actually infiltrated and possessed your dog. I could hear your dog desperately trying to stop you from spreading the truth with the soul of Paul Krugman within. I think it's important that people look at all the solutions here, because there's more solutions than there are problems. So as we wrap it up, I want to mention, the usual: food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, of course. Gold and silver as wealth insurance. As we always say, it's not investment advice. This is our opinion, but gold isn't meant as investment anyway. It's seriously, just look at history. It's wealth insurance. It's to protect you against these crises that always repeat over and over again. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, as Mark Twain once said. Now, of course, there's a decentralized, properly, fundamentally useful cryptocurrency technologies and blockchain infrastructure technologies that are absolutely revolutionary, and it's incredible to watch take place. Most are terrible, but the few that are good are really changing the world. So that's really important. There's so many things you could do. So anyway, before we finish this, John, what's your bottom line for this report and what Canadians should know?
Well, the bottom line here is that Canadians need to start talking about their money problems and money issues, and start to educate themselves on how money and economics really work. And I highly suggest they pick up a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for example. It's just basic understanding of how the world works. And unfortunately, it's written against everybody, the tax laws. So you need to figure out how to actually run your daily life without getting ripped off by the government and by the CRA and all the institutions that are stealing your money here in Canada, and just start to prepare yourself by maybe have some wealth insurance like gold and silver, and be outside of the banking system with cryptocurrencies. This is of course my opinion, but it's pretty obvious that this is one of the major things that people need to position themselves in. Don't put all of your money into it, but at least have a little bit of money into that, so you're protecting yourself a little bit, because if you don't, you are gonna get hit very hard. Because I studied so many hyperinflations and devaluations, and throughout those times, the people that the people that had food and water and shelter, as you said, they survived, But the people that really, they didn't really thrive, but on the other end, they actually made out a lot better was the people with gold and silver. And of course, these days you have cryptocurrencies that, take away the potential for, the cashless society, the bank runs that they want to eliminate and all that. Now you can, do transactions without being limited with the amount of money because you're a prisoner to the banks and to the government.
Yeah, I'm totally optimistic. They're getting desperate. They're grasping at straws, and it means that we are doing something right. So I think we should all be very excited about that. Responsibility, folks, that is the major point to be made here. We go into cataclysms here at WAM as well as the monetary system. And, what happens in a cataclysm? People go among the hunter-gatherers to survive because they're the most independent. We should learn something from them. We should learn something about being independent and responsible human beings. Protect our wealth, protect our assets, and diversify our portfolio as always. Anyway, check those links below. We got many options for you guys to help out WAM as we're getting shadow banned. We're not going to go all through it again. We have it at the outro here. But make sure to check those out. Like, share, subscribe, press to be notified, all that kind of stuff. John and I both have to turn off our air conditioners to do these videos. So it is getting hot. We're going to go and try to dry off from the sweat. So anyway, I appreciate you going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated as we are so heavily demonetized and shadow banned to a crazy extent. We have lost about 80% of our reach since the beginning of this year as they rip away subscribers, etc. It has gotten out of control and it's becoming more and more difficult to stay alive here on World Alternative Media, bringing you guys free content every day. You can also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out on all these other alternatives like Subscribestar, where we are doing subscriber only content for people at the $4.99 US a month tier and up. We really appreciate it. You could tip us on there and pledge anything, but from $4.99 and up, we are giving people subscriber only content that you won't find here on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, there are so many alternatives for YouTube these days, including BitChute, which we are on at World Alternative Media, as well as, of course, the new flote.app, flote.app, where they are truly replacing all of these social medias, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, Reddit, and of course, Twitch and Patreon, all in one place, and it is truly incredible what they are doing. We are moving over there in mass, as well as BitChute, BitTube, Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, all those other places, as well as PocketNet. We are on as well at World Alternative Media. There's so many options today, and we're trying to get into as many of them as possible because we need to back ourselves up. We are winning this information war, but we are getting to a point where they are cracking down more desperately than ever, and we got to do whatever we can to stay alive as it's getting more and more difficult all the time. We also have events coming up, including Anarchadelphia 2019, which will be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in September. Check out thestateofanarchy.com and anarchadelphia.com. Linked below, use promo code WAM, W-A-M, and save 10% on your tickets to this amazing conference as anarchy is going viral. Also, make sure to check out the Winnipeg Crypto Conference in October. Also, use promo code WAM, another great event with amazing speakers, and of course, Anarchapulco, the one and only, in February 2020, which you can also use promo code WAM for WAM and save 10%. There's so many things that you can do to help independent media, including just pressing like, sharing, clicking the notification button, doing whatever you can to help keep this free information alive that's alternative to the mainstream. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.